Good morning, I'm back. Yes, we're going to talk about another technique that is used. Now, I know a lot of people will see this title and think, well, really, I don't need to watch this video because what is there difficult about reskinning monsters? Well, I'm going to enlighten you on the process of reskinning monsters, modifying monsters, and custom monsters because it's not as simple as you might think. And I'm sure there's a few people who understand this, particularly if they've been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e for a while. How's it going, Fred? Reskinning the rust monster is as a kitten. Apply liberally. Nice. All right, cool. All right, let's flick on over to my face and see if YouTube can cope with a moving face. I don't know that it necessarily can, but if it can, it's good. We'll start with that point, and then we'll go from there. I mean, I have quite a bit to say. So if you were wondering if there was going to be some new stuff here, there definitely will. I'm going to provide you with stuff that I know people don't tell you. How's it going, Geekstar? Now, you'll find the start time for this video down in the description for those of you who want to skip past all of this if you're rewatching it. Oh, seriously. Give me a second. Now, because it's heating up in New Zealand, everything is just falling apart around me. It's like all of the things that I stick up are falling off. Give me a second. Look at this. Okay, give me a sec. Let's just make that stick. All right, that's a great. Sorry, you didn't need to see that view. I do apologise. Dear, that's pretty funny. How's it going, Geekstar? Okay, now, if you haven't been part of my live streams, normally I don't present my private region as part of the live stream. Normally I will present everything first and then open up for questions and answers at the end. And I'm going to probably do pretty much the same thing as I always have. So let's get rid of the earplugs. Settle back. Make sure if you do have questions around reskinning and modifying and making adjustments to your monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, that you have them ready, because we will cover that at some point, don't you worry. Okay, let's talk about it, shall we? Sorry guys, it's done it again. I'm going to have to get a much better technique for doing this. It's just going to keep doing it over and over. Give me one more sec. I know what I'm doing today. I've got to find a fix for this. This is getting ridiculous. It keeps happening to me. Keeps happening. There we go. There we go. And you get another brilliant view of my crutch, which is always nice, I'm sure. Okay, sorry about that. Now, will it hold? That's the question. I don't know that it will, but we'll see. We'll certainly find out. I do apologise to everybody who's had to watch my crutch numerous times. You would have thought this was... at least it gave people time to get into the room, right? Even if you did have to put up with some weird things going on. Anyway, let's get on with things. I should be able to actually do this without anything falling apart. I don't know. You may need to get another view. Who knows? Dear. Sorry. Okay. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And yes, this is like a Dungeon Master tip, guide, if you might like. And the question is reskinning monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, is it easy? Is it lazy? Is that in fact the case? I mean, I'm going to talk to you honestly about the process, because when you get yourself a unique monster, like something like this, and you want to sort of have the stat block for it, it's not available. So what do you do? Well, you can reskin it. Well, don't bet on it, Dungeon Masters, okay? To be honest, reskinning is certainly your first port of call, but there are certain things you need to understand when it comes to doing anything with a reskin of a monster. Now, this is Dungeon Master advice really for new Dungeon Masters, and for Dungeon Masters who are limited on the amount of time that they can spend, or who kind of put themselves into the category of being a lazy dungeon master. I certainly try to spend as little time as I possibly can engaged in creating monsters if I possibly can, simply because I just don't have the time. Now, you've heard it before. What you do is you take a existing monster stat block from the monster manual, Dungeons & Dragons 5e monster manual, and you use it to represent a completely new monster that you have come up with. Whether you have drawn the monster, or you have a miniature to represent it, or you have just come up with an idea of what you think it should look like, or you found a picture on the internet, it doesn't really matter. So does reskinning monsters actually work? Well, the problem is it only works if you select the right monster stat block. Otherwise, you still have a lot of work to do. In other words, you have to have a stat block that exists that's close enough to what you want. Otherwise, doing a reskin is probably not going to work. Now, there are a whole bunch of things that tend to affect a monster stat block in terms of how it operates. And you can pretty much change anything except for the following. That's the offensive and defensive monster abilities that are included in the monster stat block, because those things generally will affect the challenge rating. The only problem is that the challenge rating is not exactly hugely accurate, and I would kind of ignore challenge rating if I were you and not get caught up into that sort of thing. I know it's helpful for determining how many experience points if you're using experience points and all that sort of thing, but my suggestion to you is try to pick a monster stat block that doesn't need the following to be changed. And there's a lot. I hate to say it, there's a lot of different things that can be changed, right? And that is your armor class, your attack modifier for the attack, the amount of damage that the attacks do, the saving throws, that's the DC, how many hit points it has. Now, there's some variation in the hit points allowed, because remember, your monster stat block is only the average, and you can increase it to its maximum if you wanted. But there are some guidelines in terms of, if you increase hit points or increase the armor class, these are all defensive attributes, and you only have to change a little bit to affect challenge rating and the monster overall. So another thing to think about. And the other aspect is how many attacks. If you give it more attacks than it had before, then of course you've made alterations. So essentially, you can't change any of those things. If you're not changing any of those things, you're reskinning the monster. That's a lot of different things to deal with. And I would say to you, you will often find that quite difficult to do. You don't have time to go and play test this monster, so that's why you're doing the reskin. Essentially, there should be no play testing required. Besides, if you did engage in any kind of play test for your reskinned monster, the chances are that your players don't operate like you do, and of course you suddenly got to control the monster and all of the NPCs in the encounter to test it if you're going to play test it, and that sort of pretty much just bulldozes the idea of being lazy and trying to use just limited time to get the job done. In other words, you wind up having to play test while you're running it for the players. So that's part of the aspect behind doing a reskin, because you don't have to worry about all those sorts of things. It's actually very hard and complicated to play test a monster on your own. I've tried it. It is actually difficult to do. I'm sure there are people out there who will say, I can do it, and it's very, very easy. But no, to be honest, it isn't. And when you see these videos on YouTube explaining about reskinning monsters and modifying a monster or rebuilding them and building them from scratch, and they say, look, this is what you do, and it's not that difficult to do, it can be done very easily, it's actually nonsense. It's actually not that easy to do. Not without a bit of practice, a lot of experience, and trial and error. So how much time did you spend looking through the monster manual, trying to find exactly the right monster stat block to just reskin to lay over the top of this monster that you plan to use in your game? I will tell you what, if you have done it before, I suspect you spent far too much time. More time than you had allowed, probably more time than you had expected it to take, simply because you're trying to find just the right monster. And I've found that happen to me more than a few times, where I would go through the monster manual trying to find something that's as close to what I wanted as possible so that I can just reskin, or just try a modification, just a slight modification, and that's it. And this really only works in terms of reskinning a monster if you know the monster manual really well. If you know it back to front, that means you have to have read it. You probably have to have run a lot of the monsters, because that actually gives you an idea of how they operate on the table rather than just on the page. Because remember, what's on the page is not necessarily a good reflection of what will happen at your table. And if you've been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e for a while, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So experience is actually really important when it comes to reskinning monsters to do it successfully, because there's a time to reskin and there's a time not to reskin. And as I've said, don't worry about CR. Challenge rating, it's not accurate. In most cases, by the time the characters get to level 5, or you're dealing with a challenge rating monster of CR 5 upward, it doesn't matter. And there are low-level monsters with low challenge ratings that are incredibly deadly. So not a really good indication for your game anyway. So what do you need to know when it comes to reskinning a monster? Whether it's the good idea or the bad idea? Well, first off, you can't reskin every single monster. So just because you've got a new monster you want to run at your table does not mean it's going to work. So you may have to actually ditch that idea and go with modifying or building the monster from scratch. Unfortunately, that is often what tends to happen. If you aren't making changes to the stat block, then you are reskinning. If you are making changes to the stat block, then you are modifying it. You're not reskinning it, and modifying will always take more time. And it's not a lazy process. It is time consuming and requires a bit of brain power and a bit of understanding of how it all works. For those of you who think, well, okay, reskinning monsters is really quick. Well, no, it's not. Reskinning monsters, as I've already said, does take time. It actually takes you time to go through the monster manual. Even if you know the monster manual well, it will take you a little bit of time to actually find what you're looking for. Does it take less time than going and modifying or rebuilding the monster from scratch? Yeah, it should take less time than doing a modification or a rebuild. But I have had occasions where it's actually taken me more time to try to reskin when I should have ditched the idea and gone straight for this build it from scratch. And that's really the focus. Now, the last thing I want you to remember is often what starts out as a plan to reskin your monster will actually turn into a modification. So your intention was to actually just reskin the monster, and you've spent lots of time looking for the monster manual. You finally find something that's as close to what you're after, but it's not quite right, and then you're left with the simple choice that I'm going to have to modify it rather than just go with a flat reskin. And that will happen most of the time. For dungeon masters who feel like, no, that's not happened to me, that's great, but I have always found that there's always been something slightly lacking from a monster stat block that I needed to adjust. And it's often around those two key things that I need to worry about, which is offensive and defensive abilities. And of course, as soon as you affect them, then you affect the monster overall. Now, I'm hoping that this was useful to you. I have, as it happens, hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters providing tips, advice, and so forth. I recommend going and checking out Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, put out by a very clever fellow by the name of Mike Shaw, and he's put this out. He's got some good advice there. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily indicating all the issues you might have behind reskinning. Mike is certainly the sort of person who believes that reskinning is a very, very good idea. I say it's a good idea, but there are issues with it. Personally, there can be limitations. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing videos like this, then I have a Patreon page where you can go over there and get access to all of the live streams that go unlisted, and access to videos and content that other people don't get access to. I also give priority to my patrons in terms of what I make. I have affiliate links down in the doobly-doo is it called the doobly-doo, to Amazon, and the book depository would help the channel out as well. I have a merchandise shelf, and make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And gosh, man, do I do a lot of videos. But sharing the video is really important. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, give me a second. I just need my glasses, a drink of water. Throw out your questions. I will talk about not just reskinning monsters. So if you want to talk about other stuff, then I will. Glasses are going on. And we're flicking over to the camera again. There it is. There it is. Okay. Bam. You got my face again. All right. Okay. For those of you who are here, let's have a talk about reskinning monsters. Now, if you have some personal experience you would like to share, by all means do so. Geek Stars here. Walrus, how's it going? He said, private region. Yeah, I do apologize for those of you. I might have scared a few people away in the process of suddenly seeing my groin in the screen. Maybe I should have ensured that I put up a different screen before standing up and repositioning my panel. My panel is in front of my window, and it's cardboard, and all of the soundproofing foam is on it, but the cardboard warps in the sun. And so as a result, what tends to happen is it can come loose and fall over and cause problems. Something that I'll need to rectify in the future. Dear. Fred, probably both lazy and easy here. Yeah, not really. Hi, Don, how's it going? I don't know if you're still here. We can still see you. Yeah. Now we really see you. Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know, the crotch shot. I do apologize, big kid. You got the crotch shot. I've never tried to build one from scratch. Reskinning is how I assume everybody made unique monsters. I don't think I could build one from scratch. Yeah, I know a lot of people assume that building a monster from scratch is actually really difficult. It certainly requires a bit of time. There are some really quick, cheap ways of doing it. I did a video showing people how to do this ages ago. I think I was making the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and I did a video a long time ago on how to actually make a custom monster for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And I went through all the mathematics, which is all very well, but can be really complicated, so I understand that. But yeah, you can do it. And if you're reskinning monsters, there's nothing wrong with it. You might find that, if you do a dirty reskin, you just take what you've got and then you just tack in whatever you need to tack in and just ignore anything that you don't want to worry about. And that's good enough. To be fair, the whole stat block for a monster is usually not used. There's very little on the monster stat block that actually gets used. You're really only dealing with things like your armor class, your hit points. You might use a saving throw. They occasionally do come up, particularly if the party are using spells. But then again, they sometimes don't come up. You'll need a dex modifier for your initiative and for perception checks. If that comes up, those are the most common. And then really it's just down to your attacks, and most of your attacks are going to be most monsters only have one or two different things they can do. If you're lucky, there might be three. They might have some special features that are tied to them, all of which you can pluck out of the Dungeon Master's guide when you're building your custom monster. Okay, Hubba, before the hardcore books, we did a lot of homebrew monsters, because the selection in the pamphlet style publications were very limited. Yeah, I can believe that. Cover the back of your cardboard with aluminium foil. Well, that might be a good idea. That might help. I hadn't thought about that. I'm actually thinking I'm just going to put a new board if I put all of the foam onto a board, a hard board, that will probably solve most of my problems. When homebrewing a monster, start with a story. If you don't have a story about the monster origin, you don't need the new monster. Well, often, I mean, to be honest, Fred Hubber, if I have a story for the monster, that's certainly one place you can start, but you don't have to have a story for the monster. You can. I would often build a monster around a picture. Matty, you love the British. I'm not British, though. I'm from New Zealand. I'm not British. Matty Gilmore, not British. But yeah, you honestly don't need to worry about things like the story always. Sometimes you can just take a miniature and just build your monster. I've done that before. I've taken just a single unique miniature and I've built my monster around that. Or I've seen a piece of artwork and then I've taken that. Land of the Hobbits. Yes, apparently Lord of the Rings. Yeah, the land of Lord of the Rings. That's where I'm from, New Zealand. You're talking about the accent. Yeah, but I can guarantee you the British would not consider my accent British. They would say it's definitely very Kiwi. You know, the British are very, very specific about how they pronounce stuff. And when a sound is silent, it will be pronounced correctly and it will be silent, even though you'll see a letter there, which I know, Americans take that all out. But they would consider the New Zealand accent and how we say things to be quite sloppy, because the Australian and New Zealand accent, although it's English, is sloppy and to a certain degree. That's not a bad thing. Big Kid, I'm a Mexican, not a Mexicant. That's right, a Mexican, not a Mexicant. Yeah, good, I love it. How's it going, Stephen? New Zealand. Yes, from New Zealand. That's right. That's where I'm from. Pear Sham, how's it going? Okay, so I've covered reskinning monsters. I don't know that people will see this and understand the message I'm trying to put forward. And the message is that reskinning has its place, but it's not always that simple. What's that, Big Kid? I think my DM style comes from thinking of a moment I want to see my group to experience, and then flows from there, including monster choice. Yeah, well, everybody does it differently. I know a lot of dungeon masters who base a lot of what they do off things that are more around music or their own art. They might be more around their artwork that they do. So they're more focused on the image that they have created. But I know a lot of dungeon masters build all of their stuff around just music because that's what they sort of like. There's so many different ways of doing it. And not every way is the right way. It's just the way you do it. Now, what video will I be doing at 1 p.m? So 1 p.m. there's another live stream. For those of you who are here and are interested in what's going to be happening in about an hour and a half, I'm going to be talking about mirrors in Dungeons & Dragons. I'm going to talk to you about how you can use your mirror in the game of Dungeons & Dragons effectively and why you should have a mirror in your adventuring pack and kit. And for those of you who are dungeon masters, hopefully it will be helpful. And for those of you who have players who do not use their adventuring gear or don't bother with it, you're going to hopefully push them in the direction of that video so that they learn how to use their adventuring gear rather than just keep relying on their players' characters' class and racial and feat abilities. Alex, how's it going, Alex? Hello, I have a question. What is the main scale of D&D miniatures? Main scale, I'll be 28 millimeter. You could say it's 28 to about 32, but I believe 28 is the normal scale for D&D miniatures. I'm sure somebody will let me know. Alex has got here 28 to 25. I think it's more like 28 in most cases. I mean the grid itself would be 25 millimeters by 25 millimeters, those squares. But that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about the scale in terms of miniatures, which is different again. 25 millimeters is equivalent to 1 inch. You're welcome, Alex. No problems. Just need a drink of water. Stephen, what do you got here? No. So what do I mean by reskinning a monster? Okay, changing its stats or creating a monster from scratch. No. So Stephen, reskinning a monster is taking directly from the monster manual an existing monster stat block, and you change nothing. The only thing you've done is change what it looks like. Mechanically, it's exactly the same. So you might take let's find a monster in my little selection of images here, and apply something. So here, this monster here, this thing, you might use the Scarecrow monster stat block, but it doesn't look like the Scarecrow from the monster manual in the Dungeons and Dragons 5e monster manual. It looks like this. It looks different, but it operates more like the Scarecrow. You're using the mechanics. When you are doing something that involves a modification, you're taking the existing monster stat block and then sorry, pardon me. I just need a drink of water. It's slowly getting out of my system, this weather, but it's taking a while. So modifying a monster is when you take the existing stat block and you make a change to it which is significant in such a way that mechanically it's different. And that might apply to a monster that looks differently. Or if you're building it from scratch, if you're building it from scratch, you're essentially starting from nothing. You don't look at the monster manual necessarily, and you just build it all up from there. Yeah. It is the problem with this time of year for me in New Zealand is winter's so long, and it perpetuates for quite a while before I finally get all the stuff out of my system. So it can take a little while to sort that all out. So that's what I mean by reskinning, modifying, and building from scratch. And I believe I have shown people how to build monsters from scratch in other videos. And I think we built the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like I said. Okay, so make sure to come back in about an hour and a half and check out what you can do with your mirrors in Dungeons and Dragons, because there's lots of different cool things you can do with mirrors. And I'll be talking about that very topic. So have a good night, day, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Look after yourself and your friends and your family. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.